Well, good evening. Welcome to the 2013 edition of the Fairview Park City Schools State of the Schools Address. And I greatly appreciate your attendance. I was telling Jim Kennedy before we started that this is probably in the 8 years that we've done this, the largest crowd we've had. And then I had to step back for a second because technically it's the second largest. About 4 years ago, as I was trying to get people to come, I had Mrs. Carliak have the hummingbirds, the little people, sing, and they did great music before the program started. And then when the hummingbirds ended and the program started, the hummingbirds and their parents all left, and I had about 20 people here. So I do very much appreciate you coming out tonight, a cold, rainy night. We have a great story to tell tonight that I think hopefully you will be very impressed and proud of your school district. I'd like to extend my gratitude to the Board of Education that's sitting down here in front for bringing me to Fairview Park 8 years ago. It's been great. You're going to hear from some wonderful administrators tonight that I had the opportunity to work with. Our friends from the city, I see Mr. Kennedy and some of our council people here, and I appreciate the support of the city because communities are known by the public schools that they keep. And so I'm very appreciative of that. And then afterwards, we're doing something a little different tonight in that we're continuing on our journey of creating a 21st century education for all our children. And in doing so tonight, at the end of the remarks, I'm going to encourage you to go to the cafeteria where we have a number of children in grades 1 through 12 that are eager to demonstrate for you some of the skills and things that they've learned in the classrooms and how we do school every day. It's not going to be your typical show and tell that you're expecting. I'll give you a little bit of an idea. I was in Gillett Sweep the other day and was walking down the hallway in front of Mrs. Vaughn's class, and there were 3 students outside on their tablets researching the Southwest Indians. They were making iMovies so that they could go back in and present to their children. The other children in their class. So when you think about 3rd graders developing these kind of technology skills, that's what our kids are going to need to survive in a 21st education to survive in the 21st century. Tonight to open, I want to show you just a brief vignette by Dr. Willard Daggett. Dr. Daggett is the CEO of ICLE, which is the International Center for Leadership and Education. He's one of the foremost renowned reformers in education. He's recently spoke to the National Governors Association. We as a district have been doing a great deal of Dr. Daggett's work. The last 2 years we've gone to Columbus and had the opportunity to have private audience with him with 15 or 20 of our teachers and a group of our administrators. He has a great vision for where we need to go as a country. And so I want you to hear this little snippet of a vignette that Dr. Daggett has.
I recently had a chance to address several national leaders, including several governors, and you get that group in the audience, and you got all kinds of media. And I began my presentation that day by saying to them, ladies and gentlemen, please understand that it is wrong for the American media, and it is wrong for the elected officials in this country to keep beating up on public education. I said to them, enough's enough. Are our schools perfect? Heck no. But I've been in every state in this country. I've been in many foreign nations. And ladies and gentlemen, the finest education system on God's green earth is the American public education system. And it is the finest, not because we have the highest standards. And I'm sorry, if you think we got the highest standards, you're going to be really disappointed in the next hour. So how could we have the best schools? Because we try to simultaneously address excellence and equity at the exact same moment. And excellence and equity are in conflict. I can get you to excellence in a hurry. Let me pick and choose who we educate. The problem is, in other nations, not all of my children, nor all of my grandchildren ever would have been educated. So I begin today as a parent, as a grandfather, to all of you in this room with a sincere and deep thank you for what you do. Thank you for taking every child in this country in. And when you take every child in, we do have some extraordinary challenges, though, don't we? Because the other thing I've learned about the kids and the grandkids Young people in America today take our standard of living and quality of life as a given. And I'm not so sure it's a given anymore. Not because schools are failing, but because we have a growing skill gap in this country. And what is the skill gap? Every passing year, while we work hard at school reform, the rate of change outside of school is 4 to 5 times faster than the rate of change inside of school. So the schools are getting a little bit better, but the kids are worse off. Again, not because they failed, but because we haven't figured out how to keep up with the rate of change. And this world we live in, what we're finding is that knowledge is not enough. Kids are going to have to know how to function beyond simply the classroom. Historically, young people in America had well, let's see, how many of you have a teenager? Good. How many of you hope that teenager sometime in the next decade becomes independent? What 2 numbers on this chart will they need to be able to function at to become independent? Is it 1 and 2 or 4 and 5? 4 and 5. And I'll show you this morning increasingly level 5, because level 4 is being taken over by the technology. And I am not opposed to state testing. But ladies and gentlemen, what 2 numbers on this chart do the state test measure? 1 and 2. But you can't get to 4 and 5 if you don't have 1 and 2. Here's the problem. We've made the state test the end line in American education, rather than the beginning line. To get to 4 and 5, you need 1 and 2. Even the kids who do really well in school seem to be struggling at level 4 and 5. Overly simplistic, our kids don't know what to do when they don't know what to do. They face a situation that's new to them, and to most people it might look to be plainly obvious, but they're stuck in their paradigm.
Think about some of the things he said. 21st century education, we have to change the way we educate children today. I picked this up at a conference I was at this past weekend, and I'm going to bore you and read it to you, but read it along with me. After 30 years of doing such work, I've concluded that classroom teaching is perhaps the most complex, most challenging, and most demanding, subtle, nuanced, and frightening activity that our species has ever invented. The only time a physician could possibly encounter a situation of comparable complexity would be in the emergency room of a hospital during or after a natural disaster. Now, I'm not putting down what doctors do, but when you go to the doctor, how many of you are in the room? Just one of you. One-on-one in education, we call that tutoring. Teachers have 25, 27, 28 different children, different personalities, different needs in that classroom that we need to address. And they have an entrance exam to get into the Fairview Park City Schools is, what's your address? If you live in Fairview Park, we take you, and we'll take you where you are, and we'll take you forward. Our 21st century educational initiative is a journey, not a destination. Some people say, well, when will you get there? I got bad news, we won't. Because we're going to continue to evolve, and we're going to need to continue to evolve. Yesterday, I had an opportunity to go out to Highland Software. And if you want to see what a 21st century work environment is, Highland Software out in Westlake, where in the late 90s, it was a company of about 30 employees. Today, they have over 1,200 employees in a number of different countries and cities across this land. And the way that they do business and their means of doing business is not 1 and 2 like you saw on the top of Dr. Daggett's sheet. Education, we have to change and evolve. In this economy with 8% unemployment, we have over 80,000 jobs in the state of Ohio right now that are unfilled because people don't have the technical and applicative skills to fill them. Mrs. O'Bricky in a little bit is going to share with you this statistic again, but this one just knocks me away when we were meeting with Dr. Daggett in Columbus. 70% of the people in our country today between the ages of 18 and 25 could not and would not be capable of serving in our military. Now you think where we were as a country in the 40s, 50s, 60s, probably even the 70s. School didn't work out for you, or you dropped out, or you got a GED, or even you just had a high school diploma. You went into the military. Folks, I would state the fact that if 70% of our people can't serve in the military, then 70% of those people aren't going to be qualified to do jobs that are going to be in the workforce going forward. And if you want to know what it looks like when 30% of the people are supporting 70% of the people, all you have to do is look at countries like Greece. See how that's working out. We have to change and we have to evolve the way we do school. I would also offer that the current model that we see in schools today is unsustainable due to the costs and the benefits. It's a house of cards. And so that's why we at Fairview in the last few years have undertaken this initiative to reinvent the way we do school. We want to meet the diverse needs of all our students. We don't pick and choose. We don't have an entrance exam. And we're going to meet the needs of all our children. That's our challenge and we accept it. But we're going to do it in a 21st century way instead of just educate the best and shoot the rest. We want to make sure that all our children are college and career ready when they leave our buildings. That's a challenge. And it's like Dr. Daggett said, it's in conflict. When you've got excellence and equity, it creates conflict. But because of the work of some of the people that you're going to hear from tonight, you're going to realize not only are we going to undertake that challenge, but I'm very confident that we're going to be successful. Unfortunately, in America, I think we're a reactive country and not a proactive country. And I think we're that way in our world of education. I'm fearful that public education as a whole may have to just collapse under its own weight before we will really undertake some true initiatives. If you don't think I'm correct when I say that, I say before 9/11, how long did it take you to get on an airplane? We knew about those issues for years, but we didn't do anything about them until we had two towers go down in New York City. You look at how Americans are with their finances now, pre and post economic downturn. The statistics all show Americans are saving and they're doing all the things that we're supposed to do instead of spending 115% of what we earn. So we need to be proactive in education, and I'm proud to say here in Fairview Park that we are. We embrace technology. We don't see it as a replacement for teachers, but we see it as a very valuable tool for our teachers, as well as a tool that we need to help our children become more and more comfortable with so they can develop those application skills that they're going to need to survive in the 21st century. Some of the things that we've initiated here that I'll be the first one to tell you, they're not perfect, but they're the direction we need to go, and we'll get better and we'll keep working at it, and that's blended learning. You're going to hear about flipped classroom. We're going to talk more about student-paced work and accelerated. There's nothing magic about being 5 years old and coming to kindergarten. There shouldn't be anything magic about 9 years old having to be stuck in the 4th grade. If you can do 5th grade work, 6th grade work, we're going to move you along. And I think that's the way we have to go as a country. We can't just have a one-size-fits-all. We have to do more and utilize our technology to personalize our education. The last thing I want to show to you before I turn it over to the folks is this is a project that was done by one of our 9th graders. It was in an English class. As you may or may not be aware of, all our high school students get netbooks to use, and it was a research project done called the Odyssey. And they were supposed to create whatever medium they wanted to present their work. They had, for those of you that aren't familiar with the story of the Odyssey, it's an extended adventurous voyage or trip or intellectual quest. They're supposed to consider the purposes of the journey of Telemachus and Odysseus, and the whole Latin, the Greek, myth. So the rubric was that they had to chart the record of costs and to whom would be billed, the purpose of their Odyssey, their itinerary, their list of activities, a map, a pictorial video references, reference material for surviving on your Odyssey, and then they had to do a classroom presentation. And this young man, Brian Tran, created this.
Hello, or ni hao, I should say, because my Odyssey is in China. Of course I'm Chinese, but I hardly know the language or the culture. Oftentimes, I found myself wishing that I knew more about my background. The purpose of my journey is to learn about my ancestry and appreciate my background. My Odyssey starts on Tuesday, June 19th, and ends on Wednesday, July 4th. First of all, I'll bring sunglasses, sunscreen, plenty of water bottles, changes of clothes, my camera, my iPod, my laptop, basic toiletries, some snacks, and a backpack. On Tuesday, June 19th, I'll depart from Hopkins Airport at 8:29 a.m. I'll arrive in Beijing, the capital of China, at 3:15 p.m. on Wednesday. After arriving in Beijing, I'll take a taxi to Langham Place, the hotel I'll be staying in. On June 21st and 22nd, I'll visit the Great Wall of China. It symbolizes the unification of China. It's the longest man-made structure in the world, built for the main purpose of protecting China from northern invaders. Its total length is estimated to be 5,500 miles. As Mao Zedong once said, "He who has not climbed the Great Wall is not a true man." On June 21st, I'll take a private tour of a small section of the Great Wall, costing $395. I'll get to sleep over at one of the wall's checkpoints and hike 12 kilometers the next day. Second, I'll visit Heaven Lake, located on the border between China and North Korea on Baekdu Mountain. The lake resulted from a volcanic eruption in 969 AD. It is very pretty. On June 23rd, I'll fly from Beijing to Shenyang. After making my way to Heaven Lake, I can relax and sleep in a canvas yurt overnight. The next day, I'll return to Beijing. My third destination is the Forbidden City. Symbolizing grand imperialism, it was home to 24 emperors of the Ming and Qing dynasties. It took 14 years to build. The Forbidden City is surrounded by a 10-meter-high wall, covers 172 acres of land, and contains 980 buildings with 8,704 rooms total. On June 26th, I'll go on a 10-hour tour of the Forbidden City. I'll get to see Tiananmen Square, the Temple of Heaven, and the Summer Palace. Next, I'll stop by the Olympic Green. Beijing's bird's nest and water cube symbolize modern architecture and internationalism. The 2008 Olympics were hosted in Beijing. Construction of both the bird's nest and the water cube began on December 24, 2003. The bird's nest covers 258,000 square meters and holds 91,000 people. About 7,000 people constructed it from 46,000 tons of steel. The bird's nest cost over $500 million to construct. Beijing's water cube was completed at the end of 2007. It was where the swimming and diving portions of the 2008 Olympics took place. It takes up about 80,000 square meters and has 6,000 permanent seats. On June 27th, I'll get to tour the bird's nest and water cube for 5 hours. Fifth, I'll see the mighty Terracotta Army. The Terracotta Warriors symbolize the power of the Qin dynasty and the afterlife. China's first emperor, Emperor Qin Shi Huang, had thousands of clay soldiers made and buried with him, each soldier being distinctly different. Each life-size terracotta soldier was modeled after one of Emperor Qin's actual soldiers. About 1,900 clay soldiers have been uncovered, but there are estimated to be around 8,000 clay soldiers. The clay army is made complete with terracotta weapons, chariots, and even horses to protect the first emperor in the afterlife. On June 28th, I'll fly over to Xi'an and check into another hotel before seeing the Terracotta Warriors, as well as the Hanyang tombs, which were built for Emperor Jingdi of the Han Dynasty. After that, my next stop is way in the far west of China, Lhasa, Tibet. Located on Red Hill in the center of Lhasa is the Potala Palace. It is the highest ancient palace in the world, reaching over 3,700 meters above sea level. It was originally built in 637 AD as a gift for Emperor Songtsen Gampo's new bride. After Emperor Gampo's rule, his palace was nearly destroyed. In 1645, it was rebuilt as a seat of government for the 5th Dalai Lama. This was the main residence of the Dalai Lama until the 14th Dalai Lama fled to India during the 1959 Tibetan uprising. This 13-story palace has more than 1,000 rooms and covers over 130,000 square meters. On June 29th, I'll fly from Xi'an to Chengdu to Lhasa, Tibet, and explore Potala Palace. My final destination is the Big Buddha, or the Tiantan Buddha, located on Lantau Island in Hong Kong. Being a huge symbol of Buddhism, it sits 34 meters tall, is made of 202 pieces of bronze, and cost about $68 million to construct. There are 268 steps to the top of the temple. Underneath the statue is a very large bell that rings every 7 minutes, but only 108 times a day, symbolizing the release of 108 different human sufferings. Actually, I visited the Big Buddha with my family in the summer of 2007. Of course, I couldn't leave China without visiting it again. On July 1st, I'll fly from Xi'an to Hong Kong and take a taxi to the Big Buddha. After climbing the stairs and enjoying the view, I'll fly back to Langham Place in Beijing. On July 4th, I will conclude my odyssey and fly back to Cleveland. As for reference materials, I'll bring a Chinese-English dictionary as well as maps of all my destinations. Here's my map of China. To review, I'll arrive at the Beijing International Airport on June 20th. On June 21st, I'll sleep over at the Great Wall and return to my hotel on June 22nd. On June 23rd, I'll fly over to Shenyang and enjoy the sights of Heaven Lake. I'll return to Beijing on June 24th and relax on the 25th. On June 26th, I'll tour the Forbidden City, and on June 27th, I'll visit the Bird's Nest and Water Cube. On June 28th, I'll fly over to Xi'an and see the Terracotta Army. I'll stay overnight at Xi'an Holiday Inn and fly over to Lhasa, Tibet on the 29th. I'll explore the Potala Palace Museum and return to Xi'an Holiday Inn. I'll relax on June 30th and fly to Hong Kong on July 1st. After seeing the Big Buddha, I'll fly back to Xi'an and then back to Beijing. I'll relax on July 2nd and 3rd, and on July 4th, I'll catch a 2 p.m. flight back to Cleveland. And now the expenses. All of the flights and Flight Plus hotel combos will cost $9,476. All of the taxi riding without tips will cost $510.44. All of the private tours will cost $904. Assuming that I'll spend $10 on each meal, any meals that aren't covered by airplanes or private tours will cost $290. Hotels that aren't in Flight Plus hotel packages will cost $164.92. Finally, I can easily expect to spend $300 with all the stores and attractions in Beijing. That brings the grand total cost of my odyssey to $11,645.36. That concludes my odyssey. Thank you for watching.
That's the work of a ninth grader. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that every one of my ninth graders is doing that kind of level of work, but there are a number of them that are. And with the work that we've done in Gillis Suite with Mrs. Brady, I think more and more that's going to be a norm than an exception. At least that's our desire as we move forward. Tonight you're going to hear from a variety of people that are the real unsung heroes that make this district go from an administrative standpoint. The next person that's going to come up is Mrs. Connie O'Bricky. She's our Pupil Services Director, and she's going to share with you some of the things in her report that I will tell you that aren't there. Mrs. O'Bricky, Pupil Services is a lot of our special needs children. While she's been at Fairview Park, she has greatly increased the quality of services that our students receive, as well as reducing the cost. So whenever you can increase the quality of service and reduce the cost, and you're a public entity, that's a great thing, and we're very thankful for Mrs. O'Bricky. Following Mrs. O'Bricky will be Mrs. Brady at Gillis Suite. And those of you that have had children go through Gillis Suite know what a wonderful job she's done there, and we're very pleased to have her. Following her to the mic will be Brady Sheets, our high school principal. Where Mr. Trahan goes to school, Brady came to us last year from Olmsted Falls and has been a tremendous asset and a benefit to us. And then Mr. Gazzoni, you'll see all this and you can think, how the heck do they afford it? Because we've got guys like Mr. Gazzoni that help us pay the bills and keep things straight. One of the things he won't tell you is last year he was named the CFO Treasurer of the Year in the state of Ohio. This is our third year, Ryan, a meritorious budget? Fifth. See, I'm not good with the numbers. That's why he's the treasurer. Fifth year that we've been awarded the meritorious budget. We're one of 3 school districts and 2 school districts. See, that's why he's the treasurer. 2 school districts in the state of Ohio to win that award. So, as you can see, I'm very fortunate to work with the administrative staff we have. Tonight here we also have Ray Moore at the middle school, Chris Fick at the high school, and Trish Moran at Gillis Suite. And like I said, they're the real unsung heroes that are making these kinds of things happen in your schools. And it's just a pleasure for me to get to work with them. One last thing, and then I'm going to sit down because I'm way past my time. I've been asked that when you go out into the cafeteria, we've got first graders that want to show you what they're doing. They might be a little shy, so if you'll start the conversation with them, they'd love to tell you what they're doing, but you might need to prime the pump a little bit and ask them a question on what exactly they're doing and how it applies, okay? Thank you. Mrs. O'Bricky.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming. This is a wonderful turnout. As part of the State of the Schools tonight, we felt it was important to share with you not only what we're doing in Fairview Park, but what's occurring in public education at a state and national level. Because much of what occurs outside our district shapes what happens inside our district. And we must always challenge ourselves to think critically about our educational system. This becomes increasingly important as more families in Fairview Park are choosing public education. This year, we welcomed one of our largest kindergarten classes. This year's kindergartners, the class of 2025, will need to be prepared for jobs which do not yet exist. As educators, we have to ask ourselves, how are we preparing today's kindergartners for a career that will span the decades of 2030, 40, 50, and 60? And what will career and jobs look like, and what skills will our children need? Because this year's kindergartners will not be eligible for retirement until the year 2074. For our children to be successful for tomorrow's jobs, we must prepare them to be competitive in non-routine jobs. Jobs that are result-driven, not rule-driven. Jobs that require decision-making, innovation, and creativity. And although the United States spends more on K-12 public education than any other developed nation, studies unfortunately show that students in America are not prepared to compete globally. This lack of preparedness can lead to several factors that put our national security at risk. These five factors will be at risk if schools do not respond to the changes of the 21st century. And that risk may be all too close to home. In a study commissioned by the Council on Foreign Relations, Condoleezza Rice reported at the National Summit on Educational Reform that an astounding 70% of our nation's most recent graduates, those 18 to 25, are not eligible for the military. 70%. Factors such as health-related issues, drugs, and incarceration account for some, but most simply cannot pass the basic skills test. 70%. This limits not only the amount of people that can enter our armed forces, but also our intelligence agencies and foreign services, and this poses a threat to our national security. This trend continues to increase at a rate of 1% each year. So how are schools across America responding to this? At a national level, all but 4 states have adopted the Common Core state standards in English and math. The goal of the Common Core is to provide not only common expectations for student learning, but to allow for an in-depth mastery of concepts and have students apply that knowledge in everyday situations. The Common Core standards are fewer, clearer, and hold higher expectations for students. I would like to share with you a brief 5-minute video published by the Ohio Department of Education on more of the specifics of the Common Core.
Stop. Can you feel it? The forces that shape our lives are shifting. Forces that will affect our quality of life, our economic prosperity, our standing in the world. Change has happened, and it is up to our children to keep up. In the next 5 minutes, 39 babies will be born in the U.S., 155 babies will be born in China, and 260 babies will be born in India. China's students rank highest in the world in reading, mathematics, and science. Our students rank 14th, 24th, and 20th. India has more honor students than we have students. At least 18 nations have overall higher student test scores. And there is trouble at home. 42% of U.S. employers find high school grads unprepared for jobs. 30 to 40% of grads are unprepared for entry-level college work. That means we don't have enough qualified graduates to fill good jobs, professional jobs, high-tech jobs, blue-collar jobs, jobs that help raise a family. It means U.S. employers must cast a broader net for workers. So our kids will be competing for jobs against students from Shanghai, Stockholm, Singapore, and beyond. What do our kids need to catch up? Better reading and comprehension skills, better writing and communication skills, the ability to apply math concepts to everyday life, and strong foundations in science and technology. Our kids also need higher order skills, creativity and innovation, analytical thinking, problem solving, and the ability to work well with different kinds of people. Wow, where do we start? Meet Ohio's new learning standards. They outline what our students should know and be able to do in each grade. Think of them in terms of 3 words: fewer, clearer, higher. Fewer topics covered than in the old standards, but teachers drill deeper into each so kids learn more. Clearer definitions of achievement, so we know what our kids must accomplish to be ready, and higher expectations for what kids learn, so they can qualify for the best jobs out there. The standards are not about memorizing facts to pass a test. They emphasize critical thinking and problem solving, so kids can draw big picture conclusions, so they can create workable solutions in their adult jobs, so they can lead their peers worldwide. The standards can be tailored for all kinds of learners, and they line up with what colleges and employers need. 46 states, including Ohio, have voluntarily adopted Common Core standards in English language arts and math. Ohio also has its own updated standards for science and social studies. Our teachers are now being trained to use all of them. Schools should begin moving toward the new standards now, completing the transition by the 2014-2015 school year. How will we know if the new standards work? Through a new system of assessments or tests. Current classroom teachers are helping develop them. The tests will occur throughout each school year. The year will begin with a diagnosis of what students know, and the tests track each child's growth through the year. For language arts, that means analyzing increasingly difficult text and presenting evidence to back up conclusions. For math, that means they spend more time reasoning, problem solving, and applying math concepts to new situations. The new tests will be computer-based to give teachers results they can use quickly. We'll know in every grade if a child is on track to be ready, so students are much less likely to fall behind and more likely to graduate ready to succeed in life. Whose idea was this? The new assessments are not national or federal tests. Ohio and 23 other states have teamed up to create them, so we can measure and level achievement across our state, our nation, the world. And they will be better tests than Ohio could afford to develop alone. In the end, who's accountable? The test scores will help measure school and district effectiveness, teacher effectiveness, and how Ohio's schools and students are stacking up against other states and the world. So what can parents do? Parents can learn what the standards contain. They can understand the workplace their children will be entering, and they can support higher expectations. Now that you know about Ohio's new standards, let's talk.
At the same time as we embrace the Common Core state standards, we also focus our energies on these 3 simple concepts: rigorous instruction, relevant application, and the importance of forming positive relationships with students and their families. Our district and building level goals revolve around these 3 ideas, and most, if not all of what we do, falls into one of these 3 key concepts. This framework allows teachers to help students focus on their future. It engages the students and makes learning fun, and it helps build those emotional connections between students and teachers so that students know they are an important and valued contributor in each and every classroom. We are very fortunate in Fairview Park to have a community invested in the well-being of its children. We are very fortunate to have a supportive Board of Education and superintendent, for without their support and encouragement, none of this could be possible. We are fortunate to have a dedicated staff of teachers willing to learn and try new things. And finally, we are fortunate to have a solid financial plan that allows us to utilize resources and enhance student learning. I would now like to turn it over to Mrs. Brady, who's going to tell us a little bit about what's going on inside our schools. Thank you.
Good evening and welcome this evening. As a longtime Fairview Park resident and a 29-year staff member, I am extremely proud of our schools and the direction we are taking to offer the students of Fairview Park a challenging, rigorous, and very wonderful learning environment. We have seen our student population grow over the past few years and change, and we are always looking for ways to improve the quality education we offer to our students. The traditional model of education has been similar to a factory assembly. Rather than teaching 800 students to produce the same end product and recite the same information, we are striving to produce 800 unique individuals whose skills are fostered, differences are embraced, and critical thinking is nurtured. We want to produce students who are thinkers and challengers, not robots. This style of learning will allow them to foster and learn the skills and abilities that will enable them to be successful in the 21st century for jobs that we don't even know exist. In order to get there, we want to focus on those 21st century skills you've been hearing about. These skills are focused on developing students' critical thinking skills, problem-solving skills through communication, collaboration, creativity, and innovation. Our intent is to help our students reach a deeper level of learning, not just surface level learning where students regurgitate facts, but where students have a true understanding of the information they have learned, which means they can apply their learning to the outside world. How do we do this? Instruction revolves around students doing, being active participants and hands-on with their learning, and working in small groups to discover. All of these pictures you've seen this evening illustrate this style of instruction, and I'm excited to say that you'll be able to see it firsthand following our presentations in the cafeteria. Notice that the students are all doing and engaged in their learning through different activities. They are involved in activities that require deeper levels of thinking. Instead of listening to a lecture, students are thinking critically, problem solving, and communicating with peers in a collaborative learning environment. We also strive to foster relationships and build a community that supports all learners. Staff and administration are always looking for ways to enhance our best practices through collaboration and communication. This past Saturday, I had over 27 staff volunteer to gather in the morning at Gilliswee to explore how we can look at creating more opportunities for students and teachers to connect and support higher achievement in our classrooms. As our teachers implement the Common Core and ready our students for the next generation assessments, we need to be experts in content and help facilitate student mastery of that content. We know that the student-teacher relationship has a profound effect on achievement, so we are also looking to expand our looping programs, co-teaching opportunities, and instructional teaming. In addition, 15 members of our Bullying Prevention Committee spent 3 days this past week in an in-depth training with the Ovea's anti-bullying program. This research-based blueprint model program is designed for all students. It is preventative and responsive. It is focused on changing the norms and restructuring the school setting. The program components involve school, classroom, individual, community, and most importantly, parents. We will be introducing this to the entire building staff this fall, including teachers, support staff, recess and lunch monitors, bus drivers, anyone who comes in contact with our students. We'll also would like to include our local businesses and community organizations as well. We'll have a kickoff in the fall with our students, followed by some parent evening events as well. We want students to continue to feel safe at school and feel comfortable communicating their concerns with adults in a supportive environment. We are fortunate to have many ways for students to connect with others. Some of those, as you may know, are our Fit Kids Club, the Gillisweet Dance Team, our Technology Club, after-school tutoring, kids art. We even have Spanish Club this year, and most importantly, our after-school running club. And I want to share something. About a few weeks ago, one of our high school teachers, I think Mr. Slack, and he's here in the audience this evening, got together with a few Gillisweet teachers and decided they wanted to start an afternoon running club. Well, within a few days, we made some announcements over the PA. By Friday, I think we had close to 50 students in our cafetorium listening to Mr. Slack and some of the staff members asking if they'd want to participate in an after-school program and get together to run. By that next week, I think we had close to 40 students, Mr. Slack, 38, 40 students, on a regular base coming back to school at 4 o'clock to run 3 days a week. And I'm excited to say we'll have several of them participating in the St. Malachy race in March. We're also going to be starting a Girls on the Run Club, which is a smaller club of supportive group for girls who will be participating in that this spring as well. Finally, we have much to celebrate at Gillisweet. As we look towards the future, we know it is not some place we are going to, but one we are creating. I am so thankful to be part of such a supportive community and look forward to celebrating the successes and joys of our students. And as I referred, we have several of our students here from both the elementary and the high school, middle school, to share some of that this evening. Some of the things you will see when you go to visit in the cafeteria are students working with iPads, with iMovies, Explain Everything, comics, and keynote presentations, and these are first and second graders that are doing this. Animal research projects and Google presentations, Slide Rocket, VoiceThread, Lego Mindstorm, so many things that we are excited to share with our students doing while they're learning. I'd like to thank Mr. Graham Podney and Mr. Matt Dunlap who helped organize this, as well as our staff members who are here this evening, and most importantly, the parents who are supporting us as well. Now I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Brady Sheets, who will share some of the exciting things happening at our secondary level. Thank you.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us this evening. I think the turnout this evening is really a reflection of exactly where we are in this community and where we are as a school district, because it's events like this and it's crowds like this that really show the pride that all of you have in our schools and in the community as a whole. At Fairview High School, we feel as though schools of the future will resemble us in the present. In other words, I think we are now where other schools will be in years to come. When I have meetings with colleagues, when I talk with principals and administrators from other districts, it's almost as though we can't collaborate on some of the issues of the time, because that's how far ahead we are technologically, it's how far ahead we are instructionally, and it's how far ahead we are with making the change towards the 21st century. As was presented by Mr. Deitch earlier, we've spent a lot of time with Dr. Willard Daggett over the last 2 years in really examining what rapidly improving schools do. And his research shows that they've got some main points that show these rapidly improving schools will provide blended learning opportunities. Well, what is a blended learning opportunity? What that is a mix of online classwork with traditional classwork. And this year we have kicked off that blended opportunity for some of our upperclassmen, and next year we're going to expand upon that in both the English and social studies curriculums. So students not only have the opportunity to come in and meet with teachers, but students also have the opportunity to share with one another online, and it also provides them the chance to incorporate the technology that they will use not only in the workplace, but in college also. Online learning. The online learning in this country is almost endless, whether it be learning for remediation or learning for acceleration. The opportunities that our students have online are growing by the day. And so what online learning allows us to do is that it allows us to specialize for the individual student. This year we have students taking AP courses online. We have students that will make up credits online. And we have students that the traditional school system might not fit them, but the online learning does. And that helps us with the overall success of the school building because we are fitting the individual students' needs as opposed to trying to fit their needs into what works best for us. The digital or flipped classroom, and you're going to see more and more about the flipped classroom. But this has really been embraced by our middle school, and it will continue to be so in the next couple of years. What this is this promotes the practice to take place in the classroom so others can be there to help, whereas the lesson itself is taped and is viewed at home. It makes complete sense, but as sometimes happens in education, it takes us a while to figure that out. We have students in our math classes in the middle school now who will see a lesson online while they're at home, while they're in mom and dad's car, during a study hall, and they'll have access to that lesson throughout the entire course of the year because it's there forever. But when they get to school, instead of doing their homework at home, when nobody's there to assist them, they can come into school and do that practice and have the teacher, peers, tutors, anybody there to assist them. And other rapidly improving schools are providing activity-based lessons. You've seen a lot of it already this evening. And I have to compliment Mrs. Brady and her staff because we're receiving kids in the middle school grades that are so well prepared technologically and activity-wise that we need to be able to keep up. Because this is our student today. Our student today focuses on technology. They focus on working with one another. They are technological creatures that most of us can't even imagine. But we're not there yet. Because these are tomorrow's experts that are coming to us. Because every time that we get a new group of kids at this school, we know that they're even more technologically savvy than the group that came before them. And we need to continue to improve our skills in order to make the most of theirs. So in the high school, our core values are to ensure that students are college and career ready. The stats that Mr. Deitch and Mrs. O'Bricky gave you about the military should really set off the alarm as to just how much work we have to do to make sure that these kids are ready. We have to create and maintain high expectations. That's the rigorous part of this. We have to make sure that each student finds that niche to make the most of their education. We develop students as learners. Instead of just being the sieve that gets all that information, they have to go out and find that information. And I've had discussions with high school students already this year that just aren't accustomed to that type of learning. They want to hear the learning instead of going out and getting that information on their own. But even just in the last few months, we've seen that transformation and we've seen that change. That students are going out and finding information because that's what's going to make them most successful as lifelong learners. And finally, we want to provide rigor and relevance for all students. As Dr. Willard Daggett says, this is probably my favorite line from him, relevance makes rigor possible. If what is being taught to kids and what kids are doing is meaningful to them, then it's going to be rigorous for them. So how do we do all this? Well, this is the classroom that most of you sat in. It's the classroom that I sat in. Unfortunately, I was probably the guy in the front. Okay? So we go from isolation, and we're going to go to collaboration. We're going to have kids work together, we're going to have them problem solve together, and we're going to have them find information together to make a meaningful graduation. Because if we don't have that meaningful time in high school, then that diploma is not going to mean a whole lot. I thank you for your time this evening, and I will turn it over to Mr. Gazzoni.
Every year, this is my 5th State of the Schools, and I try and concentrate on what our financial accomplishments or innovations have been. But this year, I decided to change it up a little bit and talk about what our funding proposal that the Governor Kasich has just introduced is going to look like and what it means to us. So I always have a theme, and tonight I think my theme is insanity. And I will go with a quote from Albert Einstein that defines insanity: doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So before we can talk about the new funding proposal, I have to take you through where we've been with school funding. In 1975, the Ohio legislature introduced a radical funding formula called the equal yield formula. The Cincinnati Public Schools took that to the Supreme Court in 1979, and it was ruled constitutional. It was the only time the Supreme Court ruled Ohio school funding constitutional. Then in 1991, a group of schools filed the DeRoff lawsuit, which said that Ohio's funding system was unfair and unconstitutional. As a result of that, in 1992, Governor Voinovich introduced equity aid and increased school funding to try and address their complaints. In 1997, the Supreme Court ruled that unconstitutional. So in February 1998, the legislature created the Successful Schools Funding Formula. In May of 2000, the Supreme Court said that was unconstitutional. Then in September of 2001, Governor Taft created the Building Blocks Funding Model. And shortly after, in December of 2002, the Supreme Court said that was also unconstitutional. Fast forward to June 2009, Governor Strickland introduced the Ohio Evidence-Based Funding Model, which in June of 2011, the legislature scrapped and came to the temporary bridge formula. That brings us to this month, when Governor Kasich introduced the Achievement Everywhere funding formula. As we've gone through these different funding formulas, Fairview has not done well. We've been the loser, you would say. What you see here in gray is the amount the funding formula produced, and what you see in red is what's called a guarantee. And since 2004, we've been a guaranteed district, which means the funding formula does not work for us. So we are just guaranteed a certain amount of the prior year's funding. Most of the time it was 100%. If you look at 2005 and 6, it was 95%. 2010 and 11, which was the Ohio evidence-based model, we had a big guarantee. And we were guaranteed at least 98% of the previous year. And there was a combination in 2012 and 13 of other variables, which we lost about 25% of our state funding. So we had thought when Governor Kasich was going to introduce his funding model that we were hoping just to keep what we had and not lose any more. And we had some reasons for that. We know that our enrollment is going up. We know our property values are down. We know the last time there was a Republican governor, that's the formula they used to create the school and determine how much was the state share and how much was the local share. Much to our surprise, as you see in the far right there, when the governor introduced his plan, we have significant increases in funding in 2014 and 2015. So we thought there had to be something inaccurate that was in the formula. They're using some kind of wrong value. And we were right. We found that they were using some wrong numbers. Much to our surprise, though, they were low. They have our enrollment at 1,722 students. And that's what you see in the far left corner. In red is what you see is 2014 funding based on our projections, and in gray is 2015. This year we have 1,805 students, and based on our projections, we'll actually next year have 1,846 students, and the following year have 1,868 students. So based on that, if this funding formula made it into law, we would see significant increases in funding for the first time of this magnitude in the history of our district. But before we get too excited about that, we have to look at how the legislative process works. When Governor Strickland introduced his first budget, his recommendation was over 2 years we'd have a 14% increase in funding. By the time it made its way through the House and the Senate, we had about a 2.5% decrease in funding. Under Governor Kasich's first budget, he had us at a loss of $880,000. Luckily for us this time, by the time it made it through the House and the Senate, we only lost $676,000. So let's review what the new funding formula is. It's called Achievement Everywhere, and appropriately, the core of the Achievement Everywhere is what's called the Core Opportunity Aid, and there's 6 different components that are outside of that. For our district, we only qualify for 4, and perhaps the best part of this funding formula is students with disabilities. We used to receive about $80,000 a year back when it was funded, last time was in 2009. Under this funding formula, if we qualify, they project us at almost $500,000. They've increased the budget line up by tenfold, and they should really be commended for that. This is the first time they've really tried to address the cost of special ed funding at the state level. We'd see our gifted funding double. We would see about $161,000 for eligible and economic disadvantage, and we'd see about $25,000 for English as a second language students. However, there's a funding cap, and because of that funding cap, anything over top of the core, we can only get 125% of the previous year's funding. So as a result, we only qualify for one level of funding. It's a good problem to have. That means we're going to get at least a 25% increase in funding. There is no funding cap on this portion. And as I said, anything above that can only be no more than 125% of the previous year. So how do you calculate the core opportunity aid? I'll walk you through this. It's going to be a little bit confusing, but you'll understand in the end, I hope. What you take is you take the district's property value and you divide that by our enrollment. And what you come up with is a district per pupil property valuation. So they've come up with an equalization level. They take that equalization level, which is $250,000. So if our per pupil valuation is above $250,000, we get nothing. Ours is below. You subtract your per pupil property valuation amount, multiply times 20 mils, and multiply times your ADM, and you come up with the state share. This may seem like a completely different way of funding. It may seem, at first glance, it's impressive. If you read a quote out of the recent Canton repository, they say the most striking feature of the plan, which Kasich calls achievement everywhere, is the radical change it would make in the way the state calculates the amount of money it sends to the state's 1,613 districts. By calculating and increasing the state's core funding for every district except the richest 24 on a tax basis equal to the district with $250,000 in property value per student, the plan would take the wide range of local property wealth virtually out of the equation. I'll share a secret with everyone if you promise not to tell the Canton repository. In 2009, and every year before that was based on a per pupil funding amount. That amount in 2009 was $5,732. There was a charge-off amount of 23 mils. If you divide those two amounts, you come up with $249,000. So in 2014, all we're doing is making the formula go backwards. We're starting with $250,000. They've lowered the charge-off to 20 mils, and now we're getting $5,000 per pupil, which is why you see almost 400 districts on the guarantee, meaning they're not going to get any more money in state funding than they did the previous year. The reason we're going to see more money is our enrollment has gone up and our property values have gone down. In the rural parts of the state, they're seeing decreases in enrollment and farmland is going up in value. Or on my side of the state over by Youngstown, with the fracking, you're seeing that property go up in value as well. If that happens, you're going to see a decrease in revenue. So what's happening in Fairview Park? Since 2002, we've seen a decline in enrollment. And it bottomed out in 2009, and we've started to see increases. And we've been able to trend this, so what you see in white is where we think our enrollment's going to go. We're basing that off of census data and the percentage of students age available for to enter schools, and what percentage comes to public schools. We know we don't have more students in Fairview Park than we did in 2000. And, we're down about, between the ages of 0 and 17, those students were down about 10%. So we know we don't have more students. That's not why our enrollment's increasing. What we do know is, in 2001, 45% of the eligible students that entered kindergarten went to private or charter schools. In 2012, only 26% have gone to private and charter schools. We know that's why, by looking at the data, that's why our enrollment is increasing. We also know that we had property increases every year. We were becoming a wealthier district up until 2008. In 2008, we had, into 2009, we had over a 9% decrease in property value, and just this last year, we had another decrease. So we have less property wealth and more students. What that means is what you see in gray is the local share, and what you see in red is the state share. And from 2003 to 2009, that state share got smaller and smaller. Even under the governor's projections, which are low, the state share gets much larger than it has been in previous years. The interesting thing is if you took our exact demographics and put it back in the 2009 funding formula, we would be almost exactly where we are today using our current enrollment projections. But with that funding cap, this slide illustrates the funding cap. We actually go down to using the enrollment projections we think we're going to have in 14. We go back to the 2003 funding levels. 2003 is an interesting comparison as we were going through this. The reason is that was the last time we were not on the guarantee. In addition, we had enrollment that was almost exactly what it's going to be in 2014. Our property values were only 4% more this year than they were in 2003. Those are the two main variables that drive the funding formula, and our state funding is exactly the same. So for our district, the radical new funding formula that was introduced takes us back to 2003. So that's where our revenue is going. So what does that mean for our expenditures? If our revenue is going back to 2003, which is actually an increase from where we were this year, how have we been managing our finances? Well, if you look at the Consumer Price Index, according to the U.S. Department of Labor, during that time period, we've seen a 26% increase in inflation. Our budget in Fairview Park for the general fund has only increased 6% since 2003. In addition, what you see here is our per pupil expenditure. We topped out in 2009 and 10, and we've had a decreasing per pupil expenditure ever since. The reason 2009 and 2010 are so high is because we did some initiatives. We paid off a 15-year loan because we weren't making much on interest. That was $1.4 million in 1 year. And we replaced our entire bus fleet. This significantly increased our per pupil expenditure. If you went back and looked in 2003 how we compared to surrounding districts, we had the highest per pupil expenditure. We had one of the highest per pupil expenditures in the state. Today, we sit at the second lowest among our surrounding districts. Even if we don't get any additional funds from the governor's new proposal as it works its way through the Senate and the House, we have a balanced budget through 2015. That's not cash, that just means we're bringing in more revenue than we're going to spend. If the governor's proposal makes it into law, we will balance our budget through 2017, which is unheard of in the state of Ohio right now. So we're hoping that if the governor's budget doesn't make it the whole way, that at least some components of it do, so we're at least back to where we were in 2003. Thank you.
Folks, as you can see, we've got some very, very talented people that are doing some great things for our kids. And as I said at the beginning, it's a privilege to get to come to work with these people every day. What I want to do, because we got a number of young people out in the cafeteria that are dying to show you some of the things that they're learning in school, we'll take a few questions if you have some questions, and then I'm going to cut it off, but all the administrators and myself will stay around, and we'll be out in the cafeteria as well, that if you want to come up and ask us a specific question, you may do that. But I guess at this time, I'll take a few questions, and then we'll get back outside to the cafeteria so we can see the little people a little bit. Questions? Yeah, Twyla?
I know one of the things that you did to save money was to have the report cards not on paper, they were at the computer. How is that working out? What do you do with the things that you don't have computers?
Well, what we're finding out, and no offense, Twyla, but I'm one of those guys that's kind of naive. I think, geez, what do we do? Lots of people won't. We didn't have any complaints, but they're available. We make available if they want to come up to the school. If some people just absolutely need it, we'll print them a paper copy. We prefer they go to the online because they got pull-down menus that they can get specific feedback about test scores, quiz scores, homework, what strands they're doing well in, where they're struggling. So they get more than just that ABCDF. So we make it available to them here, plus they can go to the library, and we let them know some other areas where they can go that they can access. But it's also to keep in mind, it's the same portal and it's the same instrument that they use, that they can chart their children's progress book all during the 9 weeks as well. So it's the same portal. Yes, yes. Yes, ma'am. At this point, no. We are going to renovate. That's a good question. Thank you. And Mr. Sheets, if you want to jump in here, and Mr. Moore, you can do that as well. We're renovating the Parkview space in anticipation. You saw the numbers that Mr. Gazzoni shared with you about enrollment. At this point, at this stage, the first grade will stay at Gillis Suite, okay? and we'll move the 6th grade over here to the middle school, and they'll be self-contained right up by the front office, okay? But we have a nice problem. When we meet as first-ring superintendents, I'm one of the few that can say we have enrollment going up. As well as the Board of Education and I, and Mr. Gazzoni, we've talked about other options, looking even further down the road, that what happens when we potentially outgrow where we're at. Mrs. Brady right now at Gillis Sweet has 35, 40 more children in grades 1 through 6 at Gillis Sweet right now than we had in K through 6 when we opened that building. So we've already moved the kindergartners, now we need to move the 6th graders. And at some point, we're going to need to maybe do something with the 1st graders, maybe even do something more radical. Of an intermediate building needs to be built somewhere in the district. Wouldn't that be a nice problem? Other questions? Like I said, my administrative team and myself will be around if you want to come up and ask us questions specifically. I know the young people out in the cafeteria are really excited to show you what they do and some of the skills they've acquired. And like I said, especially some of the younger ones, start the conversation with them, ask them what they're doing, and then you might have trouble getting them to stop. But start to prime the pump if you would. Thank you again very, very much for coming out and being involved in your school. Thank you.